Welcome to The Rest is Politics US with me, Katty K.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci. And we are in Katty's home now.
Yes, we're doing the tour of each other's houses at the moment.
Home tour.
My house is a little different from your house. This is
It's lovely.
1880s, which by American standards is ancient. It's a ruin.
Yeah, but this is an absolutely gorgeous house. And I can see Jackie Kennedy and Jack Kennedy walking in front of the house in the 1950s. Right? This is their neighborhood.
You know, can I tell you one little tidbit about this house? In the house across the street, there's a little carriage house, which is reportedly where Marilyn Monroe and JFK used to meet for their trysts, right 20 yards from our front door.
She went right to the National Enquirer and the tabloids. Very impressive.
I went to history.
Well, it was very
You
impressive.
did money, I did history. Okay, there's been this what could be a little bit of an October surprise moment with Joe Biden having said on a phone call, the audio of which then came out, that the only garbage he could see was Donald Trump's supporters. And the reference was to what we talked about on our last episode, the Madison Square Gardens comedian who talked about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage.
Yeah, okay, so let's just characterize what the president was trying to say and why this is a huge gaffe.
Well, this is what the White House says the president was trying to say.
The supporter, meaning the comedian that made the remark about the garbage, not the 60 to 80 million people that are going to vote for former President Trump. But it really doesn't matter. He had an opportunity to get out of the fray and allow for the Ellipse speech, which I know we're going to talk about. I thought it was a great speech. I went through the transcript this morning. I watched it last night. And, I think she was generally positive, and I think it was positively viewed, and it was a centrist speech. Biden bigfooted that speech, if we're just being honest.
He stepped in it.
Because everybody's running it now. And of course, Trump is running it, and Fox News is mentioning it every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've just been watching Fox News, and it's pretty much the only subject on Fox News at the moment. I also actually have been watching CNN, though, and it's running on CNN too. So it is one of those moments where when you are the White House debating whether there was an apostrophe in the word supporters, I think you have a problem. It reminds me of covering Bill Clinton when he was saying it depends what the meaning of is around his affair. Is he having an affair with Monica Lewinsky? And it's just not a position and it sounds just terribly like politicians. I mean, that's what politicians do. They pass words. And I think that doesn't help her.
And I've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning it again. Richard Nixon was devastated personally, but it also hurt his campaign when in roughly the same time, 5 or 6 days before the campaign was over, election day, they asked Dwight Eisenhower, so Richard Nixon was your vice president for 8 years, what were his contributions to the administration? And Eisenhower looked at them and said, well, if you give me a week, I'll think of one. And it was absolutely devastating to Nixon, and the papers ran with it. It's not as mass media 60 years ago, but it hurt Nixon. It definitely hurt him. And, there are people on Fox News saying, well, that's intentional. Joe Biden is sore that he got ejected from the campaign. He wore a Trump hat.
I don't buy that, do you?
I see you wincing. It's not whether you or I buy it.
Of course.
It's whether they buy it, right? Remember what John Maynard Keynes said about the stock market? I am a beauty contest judge, and it's not for me to examine what's beautiful, but it's for me to think of what my fellow judges are examining what's beautiful. That's how you judge the stock market. That's how you judge a campaign. And Fox is running with that, Katty, because they want people in Trump's camp to know or think that the other side thinks you're garbage, which hopefully will intensify their passion to get out there and vote.
And also will somehow mitigate for what was said at Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
And the explosion that had around Puerto Rican voters and whether it became a big...
Does it do that?
So we're recording this on Wednesday around 3 p.m. in DC, and about 55, 60 million people have already voted. So even before all this, tens of millions of Americans have voted, and this, of course, won't impact their vote one way or another. I guess there is a chance that it distracts from Kamala Harris, first of all. It distracts from what I do agree with you was a very good speech on the Ellipse last night, and we can dig into that a little bit more. And it just doesn't help. I mean, as somebody from the Trump campaign texted me on Monday.
You were so polite and diplomatic. This devastates her.
But okay,
it devastates her because it.
Are you saying this could cost her the election?
I don't know if it's going to cost her the election, but this is like a bomb going on. She's got the big Mo. They're talking about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage. She goes to the Ellipse and she gives this beautiful centrist speech. And she says, if you're a supporter of Donald Trump's, it's not going to matter to me. I'm on your team too.
Right. I'll have you at the table.
And then he drops a bomb and says, if you're a supporter of Donald Trump's, you're a pile of garbage. You can't do that. I'm not saying he intentionally did that, but this is a big gaffe. This will be something. There's a book being written about this election right now. And this is going to be in the book. This is going to be 5-6 pages of the book and what the ramifications were to
I agree,
the
but
vice president.
You asked, how does it impact her? And I assume you mean electorally. I don't know that we know how much it impacts her electorally, just as I don't know.
It's a big distraction, Katty.
It's a big distraction,
brutal.
It's a very tough distraction. And just as the Trump campaign was texting me on Monday saying this is a distraction because of that comedian at Madison Square Garden and no distractions are welcome at this stage, this is a very bad distraction for her. I think we can't quantify whether it costs her the election is what I'm saying. I mean, maybe, yes, if she loses, is it possible that we look back and say, wow, this was the basket of deplorables moment. This was the Jim Comey letter moment. And it's possible that that's the case. And what we do know is that in 2016, late voters, people who decided late in the election cycle, broke disproportionately for Donald Trump. So it's possible that if we still have 4% to 6% of voters out there who have not decided, this could impact their vote. Does it impact their vote more than that comedian saying this Puerto Rico is an island of garbage floating in the ocean? I don't know, is all I'm saying. I'm just admitting that I don't know.
It was an unforced error, unnecessary, absolutely hurts.
It's also a reminder of why he is not the candidate.
Before we go, of course, because that's a type of gaffe you can't make.
Should she distance herself more forcefully from him over this than she has done?
She tried to do that this morning underneath Air Force Two, but I don't think it's good enough. A more declarative statement would have been better. She's not going to do that, of course, so that's also hurtful. Before we go to the Ellipse speech, because I'd like to get your reaction to it, I have also been corresponding with the Trump campaign, and a senior person sent me by Apple Music Moving Out, which of course is a very famous Billy Joel song. And he said, I just let you know that I'm jamming to this song and it made me think of you walking the precincts for Kamala. And so I wrote back, I said, okay, I expect to be deported soon. And he wrote back, yes, but the comedian will be first. You know, the one from Sunday?
Yeah.
And it's all jokey, haha.
But it shows you how much they're impacted by that comedian.
But it shows you how they're impacted by the comedian. He's also teasing me because of the FT article where I said Billy Joel's The Long Island Gospel. But he's also...
You're loving all of this, aren't you?
Yeah, but he's also saying something. He's saying something.
Right, Deirdre? He's loving all of this.
He's saying,
yeah. He loves it all.
I'm shameless, right, baby?
Shameless.
Katty's talking to my...
We have Anthony's wife sitting right here, and she, like me, realizes that he's basically a baby.
If we ever put her on the show, of course, I did a show with her called Mooch and the Missus, and she gave it up for her two boyfriends, James and Nicholas. But if we ever do a show again, she'll blast me out of the water worse than Katty.
That's their sons. Okay, wait a minute. So let's talk. Wait a minute. Can we get back on track?
I just want to say this about the Trump official. I just want to say this about him, that I think he's worried because he's reaching out to me. And if he wasn't worried, I think he's worried. Do you think they're worried?
I think the fact that they are preemptively reaching out to you is always an indication of a slight lack of confidence. When they start reaching out to people who they know have a public voice in order to try to impact that public voice, it usually suggests that they are a little worried about the message. Let's talk a little bit more about the Ellipse. You raised it. I thought the staging was great. Some critics suggested that, if she's standing there against the White House, that ties her to Joe Biden. I think actually the last person she wants to be tied to today is Joe Biden. But I think actually it made her look presidential. I thought the staging was magnificent. The lighting was very good. For voters who may be thinking, are we ready to elect a woman? Are we ready to elect this woman? Do we know enough about her? Do we think we can trust her to be commander-in-chief? I felt that having her stand there in front of the White House was a very good symbolic way of showing she belonged there. So the stagecraft of it was good. I also thought her line about he'll lock his enemies up, or in your case, Anthony Scaramucci, he will send them to London, but I will give you a seat at the table. And that my philosophy of dealing with people that have different ideas to mine is to incorporate them, because that's actually how you get the best decision. I thought that was a very good, I thought it was a great line.
I have a to-do list. He has an enemies list. That's just like the General Motors is alive. Osama bin Laden is dead. They're good at this. But I am including you. He is deporting you. Also very positive for her. But there's something going on right now that's quite interesting to me. The markets are moving towards Trump, both in terms of the way the money's being placed in the market and the prediction markets in terms of the betting cycle for Trump. As an example, in London, if you put if you put $1 down, okay, let's you put $9 down, you get $4 back. Okay, that's the odds right now if you're going to bet a Donald Trump victory. Okay, so he is way ahead in the betting markets. So I don't know, are the betting markets skewed? Some people are saying they are. Some people are saying they're not. I'm a markets person, 35 years. If just looking at the market, Trump's going to win. Okay, anybody that's a macro investor, Trump's going to win. If you're talking to people that are in the know, and I'd like to get your feedback on this, I ran into somebody at lunch today who I know a long time, very serious person, senior person, not on the campaign, but in the administration, said that she's got big numbers in Pennsylvania favoring her, early voting, also polling. She's winning big time in Pennsylvania. And then coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, this morning, Trump is tweeting out, blaring stuff on Truth Social that he's going to be bringing mega lawsuits in Pennsylvania.
So I think that is very interesting, and what you're hearing, because that is based on actual data rather than hunches. And if they're seeing those big numbers, that would, in Pennsylvania, that's a very good sign for them, clearly. I have heard from the campaign that the phrase that is going round in Delaware, which is where the campaign headquarters is nauseously optimistic. Not cautiously optimistic, but nauseously optimistic. They're all feeling kind of anxious, and nobody wants to be too upfront about being optimistic, but they feel bullish about these early voting numbers, and they do believe that the focus on abortion rights is cutting through, and that they're seeing large numbers of women in particular, disproportionate to previous election campaigns, turning out and voting early.
If she does win, I'm going to ask our producers and our team to go through Elon Musk's tweets about early voting and about voting in Pennsylvania, voting in other parts of the country, where they're trying to beam to people that it's a fait accompli for Donald Trump. Because, I don't know, maybe that's an FCC violation, Katty. I'm not sure. I'm just saying it seems weird to me that he controls that entire platform. He changed the entire algorithm. And now with his 270 million followers, he's sending out information that may or may not be accurate. So we'll have to see. We'll have to address that at some point.
Let's talk about what we're hearing from the Trump campaign and how they're feeling. We mentioned it a little bit in the first half. They are still, in text to me, sounding incredibly bullish. They still believe, or at least say they believe, that they're going to win 6 out of the 7 battleground states. But you talked briefly in that last half, and I do think we should talk about this. Donald Trump at increasingly high volume levels, talking about the fact that he thinks that he already believes there is cheating going on in Pennsylvania, and being very specific about it. And he sent out this Truth Social post last night in which he said, Pennsylvania is cheating and getting caught at large scale levels, rarely seen before. Report cheating to authorities. Law enforcement must act now. And I think a bit like you, I read into that a sign of nervousness. I mean, if you think it's going your way, why are you going to say in anticipation that it's fraudulent? Because if you're winning, you wouldn't say it was fake.
I agree, but the only documented cheating there's been a few bombs that have taken place where ballot boxes have been set on fire.
And ballots lost.
And they're primarily Democratic ballots that were set on fire. So if there's any cheating going on, it's not going against Donald Trump, but that is a tell from Donald Trump. That's a blink. Donald Trump says to you that he's not a gun waver, meaning you're at the OK Corral and he's not waving the gun. But when he's tweeting like that on Truth Social, that's a sign of gun waving 5-6 days out from the election.
The other thing that happened kind of that's interesting on the Republican side was Steve Bannon being released from prison yesterday. Actually, oddly, he was staying in the same hotel that I was staying up in New York, and there was tons of security and tons of press, and he was giving a press conference.
When he came out, the only thing I could think of is the crab from SpongeBob. I mean, it was either he was sunburnt or he had rosacea or there was something going on. And I was looking at him. And the other thing I thought is, wow, Steve ate a lot of food in prison, which usually when you're coming out of prison, you got pecs, developing a six pack, but not Steve. Okay. And to quote Donald Trump, I would say sloppy Steve. That was quite sloppy.
So that was
my reaction, actually.
That was your aesthetic reaction.
Yes.
So I watched a little bit of his press conference and tuned into a tiny bit of the War Room podcast, which I'm going to admit is not part of my regular diet. You know what's
great about you? You don't laugh at any of my jokes. You're just stone cold Steve Austin. Okay. Stone cold Katty K. Don't laugh at the joke. Go ahead.
I do laugh at plenty of your jokes.
You do? Okay. All right. Not that one, apparently. Okay. It was probably too vicious of an aesthetic attack. But okay, well, so what do you think of sloppy Steve while we're talking about it?
So I guess it's all we're in the stage of the campaign where we're wondering, does anything change anybody's minds? Does anything tip the scales one way or another? And I suppose you should examine the case that there is Steve Bannon with this very successful podcast and a lot of people who listen to him. And if he comes out and talks as he did on the podcast about how he is a political prisoner and he's fully energized and 2020 election was absolutely stolen and people should come out in massive numbers to vote for Donald Trump, does it make a difference? Does that kind of having that kind of reach make a difference? Does it galvanize some of his male supporters?
I don't think it makes a difference, but I'm going to tell you where Steve would make a difference. Should Trump win, he won't be a part of it because they're distant from each other, but Trump will call him. Trump knows how smart he is, and Trump is very, very good at calling certain people to get certain opinions on personnel, get certain opinions on policy. And it'll be from a distance, but Steve Bannon will be shaping the administration. And you live here in Washington, and I only had an 11-day stint here. But what we both know is that personnel is policy, Katty. And Steve Bannon out of prison will be in Donald Trump's ear if he becomes a president-elect. I don't think he's going to have much impact 5-6 days out from the election.
By the way, that was a really funny joke about SpongeBob that you made a few minutes ago.
Oh, my God, brutal. The British are very brutal. The British are not coming. They're here, and they're brutal, the British.
Do you think this election is drifting away from Donald Trump?
If Joe Biden had got his fat tongue out of the way, I would have said the momentum was really going our way into the weekend. I think it's stalled a little now, again, if I'm just being brutally honest. But I love the organization of this campaign. I've been out in the field, as have you. And I love the field operation of this campaign. And my money is on that field operation. I do think that they're getting out the vote. And remember, they knock on the door. Someone comes to the door and says, I'm voting for Harris. The next thing they say is, do you have a ride? Mm-hmm. Do you have a ride to the polling station? Or do you know where the drop box is for your mail-in ballot? And they're very, very well organized. He doesn't have that. He's got the megaphone of X. How many people are really listening on X? I know there's millions of people on X, but the voters, is it 10 million people listening? 20 million? Katty, I don't know the answer, but it's not the entire electorate is on X. Informed electorate, perhaps, but there's less informed people, lots of union people, lots of blue collar people that traditionally vote Democrat. And again, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. She's relying on people that consistently vote. He has to rely on people that don't vote. And I don't know. I like it because, Dobbs, the very famous Supreme Court case that repealed Roe v. Wade, polls -6, meaning there's a +6 for the Dems in the polls in 22 and in 23. And I'm just wondering, there could be that in 24, in which case Trump's going to get smoked. And then you and I will be doing a podcast saying, well, he got smoked. Here are the reasons why. Organization, and he got smoked because of Dobbs. If she gets smoked, it'll be because they got her started too late in the game. Joe Biden, not much of a help. And she didn't really frame the narrative about herself as much as she's saying, hey, I'm not Donald Trump. You better vote for me because he's nuts.
So the only criticism I would have had about the Ellipse speech. And she did run through some economic policy issues, and she did criticize his economic policy issues. She talked about how he would impose, I like the framing of a tariffs as a sales tax, which is what actually most economists would say they are. And she framed his policies, economic policies, as inflationary. But it was interesting, this morning I was on Morning Joe, and Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, who is running for the Senate seat up there, was on Morning Joe too. And she said that voters tell her that democracy is not the number one issue. The number one issue is still inflation and the economy. And I think if she does not win next Tuesday, it will also be a criticism of the fact that somehow her campaign did not manage to make the case to American voters that they will do something clear and concrete on the issue of prices. And she raised that in the Ellipse last night. She revived the idea of putting a cap on price gouging and investing price gouging. But
again, not disrupting the free market as much as making sure there isn't collusion in the free market.
Exactly. Which is something she hadn't talked about for a while. I was interested to hear her say that last night, because it's clearly a nod to the issue of grocery prices.
I'm for her, but I've got to be objective on our podcast and say that I feel that she is not conversant in these issues. Like if I said, okay, what's the difference between secular and transitory or systemic inflation? She's not going to probably be defining those. If I said to her, okay, what is the economic impact of every 50 basis point move from the Federal Reserve in terms of how that follows down into GDP? Not super conversant on that. These tariffs are a human unmitigated disaster for the United States.
I think framing them as a sales tax was a smart way to frame them, actually.
It
politically.
was. I liked it. I liked it a lot last night. That was really good. But we probably needed 3 weeks, a month of that.
I agree with you.
Okay, no, you
it's
had
a
to
little
hammer
late.
that. Had to hammer that. Okay, but let me ask you this: the Terminator, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, in a full-throated endorsement of Vice President Harris. He's related to Bobby Kennedy Jr., obviously, distantly. What do you think of that? Any impact? American men love Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I know, but it's been pretty clear all along that he hates Donald Trump. It doesn't really surprise me that he would endorse Kamala Harris, because have you seen all the videos he's put out about Donald Trump over the course of the last 5 years, 6 years?
Just asking the question because, I have my 36-year-old who helps me and takes me out of the city from time to time and other things. Loves Arnold Schwarzenegger. Texted me that had an impact on him.
Interesting.
Made him pause a little.
Interesting.
Read the whole thing on Instagram and so forth. He's an icon to American men. And 5 days before the election, he's full-throated endorsement of the vice president.
As Arnie would say, we will be back.
There you go.
Hasta la vista, baby.
The accent, you could use a little work on the accent, by the way.
We will have another episode on Friday. You didn't laugh at that joke either, so we are now tit for tat.
I didn't laugh at it. I was critiquing the accent.
Hasta la vista, baby. We'll be back on Friday with another episode before the actual vote on Tuesday to keep you up to date with all this very fast breaking news on The Rest is Politics US. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you Friday.